There's only so much you can see between the clay, the water, but it's real. And that's the important part. There's a wood structure down there. And at that point, it becomes, okay.
There's a moment in every major breakthrough when the person at the center realizes, before anyone else, that everything is about to shift. For Emma Culligan, that moment didn't happen out in the wild, not on a windswept mountain or knee-deep in an icy river. It happened inside a cramped trailer under harsh fluorescent lights, surrounded by stacks of cardboard boxes and long cylinders of rock most people would ignore. She lifted one core sample, about the length of her forearm, and slowly rotated it under the light. Just a slight adjustment, and there it was. A barely visible glimmer threading through the dull gray stone, subtle but unmistakable, like something quiet finally demanding to be heard. She set it down, opened her notebook, wrote 3 numbers, closed it. Then she looked at her partner and said, almost in a whisper, "We need to make a call. $450 million. That's what was hidden beneath the ground, not scattered, not theoretical. Not one of those deposits that sound promising on paper, but fall apart in reality. This was concentrated, defined, reachable. The kind of find that doesn't just build careers. It reshapes an entire region's geological understanding. But here's what rarely gets mentioned. This wasn't luck. Emma didn't stumble into it. She didn't chase rumors or dig where someone told her to. She approached the earth like a text waiting to be read. Carefully, methodically, and with a level of focus most people simply don't maintain. She revisited core samples that 3 separate teams had already examined and dismissed. She applied analytical models that didn't even exist a few years earlier. She noticed structural patterns in the geology that others had written off as noise. And then she acted. This is the story of a geologist who saw nearly $500 million worth of gold where everyone else saw nothing. A discovery hiding in plain sight, visible only to someone willing to question everything that came before. If you're new here, welcome. Stick around, because we go beyond the surface every single week. Now, let's dive in. Emma Culligan grew up in a mining town in northern Ontario, Canada. A place where the economy rises and falls with what comes out of the ground. Dinner conversations weren't small talk. They were about shifts, rock formations, and the quiet tension that settles over a town when a mine shuts down. Her father was a geologist, not famous, not academic, just someone who spent decades in the field and underground, learning to read rock the way others read weather patterns. He didn't teach Emma from textbooks. He taught her through experience, through samples, landscapes, and the subtle clues hidden in terrain. He showed her how the earth reveals its secrets, and how easily it can conceal them. By the time she entered university, Emma already had years of hands-on understanding behind her. She focused on structural geology, especially hydrothermal systems, the underground pathways where superheated, mineral-rich fluids travel through rock over millions of years, eventually depositing metals like gold, silver, and copper when conditions shift. She graduated at the top of her class, then surprised everyone. Instead of taking high-paying corporate roles, she chose a junior position with a small exploration company in the Yukon. She wanted the field, the data, the isolation, the kind of work where it's just you, the terrain, and the conclusions you're willing to stand by. Her professors didn't understand the decision. Her father did. Over the next 8 years, Emma built a reputation, not as someone loud or forceful, but as someone nearly impossible to argue with, because she was exact. She could hold complex geological information in her mind all at once, layers of rock, fault systems, alteration zones, past drilling data, and piece them together into a coherent picture, a picture that made others stop and think, how did I miss that? Her approach was different. Most geologists focus on what's present. Emma paid equal attention to what wasn't, what should be there, but isn't. What does that absence reveal? Where did the heat go? The fluids, the pathways, and ultimately, where did the gold go? That mindset, reading the ghost of a system rather than just its visible parts, is what led her to the discovery that changed everything. She was brought in to review old exploration data from a claim in the northern Yukon, a region with some early gold production, but a long history of underwhelming results. 3 separate teams had already assessed the area, drilled a few holes, found nothing impressive, moved on. Emma asked for something simple, every core sample, every box, every drill hole, years of material sitting untouched in storage. She started with the first box and kept going. Before we go further, let's break down something important, what core sampling actually is. Because if you've never been in an exploration camp, this part matters. When geologists want to figure out what's happening beneath the surface, without digging a massive pit or building a full mine, they drill. A diamond-tip drill cuts deep into the earth at carefully planned angles and depths, pulling up a long, continuous cylinder of rock. That cylinder is called a core. Each section of core is like a snapshot of the earth at a specific depth. Line up enough of those samples across an area, and you're no longer guessing. You're building a detailed 3D picture of what's happening underground. The teams before Emma had done exactly that. They drilled their holes, collected their cores, sent samples for testing, and the results came back disappointing. The gold content was too low, too scattered, too inconsistent to justify spending more money. So, they walked away. Emma didn't. She spent 11 straight days going through those same core samples, box after box, tray after tray. On the fourth day, something caught her attention. It wasn't obvious, not dramatic. Nothing that screamed gold deposit. It was subtle. A specific type of alteration, a chemical shift in the rock caused by hot, mineral-rich fluids moving through it. It showed up repeatedly, but only in certain drill holes and at certain depths. Most geologists would have logged it as background detail and moved on. Emma didn't. She recognized it instantly. She had seen that exact pattern before, in a producing mine in Nevada. Not in person, but in a technical paper she had read 3 years earlier and never forgotten. Here's the key. The pattern itself didn't mean gold. It meant movement. It showed where the hydrothermal fluids had traveled underground, and if you could trace where those fluids went, you could figure out where they eventually stopped, and that's where gold tends to accumulate. Emma pulled out the drill maps and started marking every instance of that alteration across the entire claim area. Then she layered in the known fault lines. Then she compared depths from each drill hole. Slowly, something took shape. A large geological corridor, completely overlooked, cutting diagonally across the property at an angle no previous drilling program had properly tested. Every single hole had just grazed it. Not one had drilled straight through it. That's why the results had been weak. They weren't in the wrong place. They just weren't in the right place, or at the right angle. Emma leaned back, staring at the map she had built, letting it sink in. Then she leaned forward again and started planning. 6 new drill holes, carefully chosen targets, precise angles, exact depths. She wrote up her analysis, backed it with data, included her structural interpretation, and sent it in. The company approved it within a week, partly because her reasoning was solid, partly because the cost was manageable, and partly because no one really expected it to change much. Then the results came in. The first hole showed gold values so high, the lab ran the tests twice to be sure. The second hole was even better. The third hit something no one had ever seen on that property. Thick, high-grade mineralization that completely changed the conversation. At 6 o'clock in the morning, the project manager called Emma, not to celebrate, to ask, in complete disbelief, "How did you know?" The answer was simple. She looked where others didn't. Not because she was more brilliant, but because she was more patient, more willing to question assumptions, more determined to follow the evidence wherever it led. Her father had told her something years ago. The ground never lies. It just doesn't reveal everything to people who aren't asking the right questions. By the time all 6 drill holes were completed, the numbers started coming in, each estimate larger than the last, until finally, an independent report confirmed it. $450 million worth of gold, measured, verified, sitting in ground that had already been dismissed by 3 different teams. Then came the aftermath. The mining world is small, and word spreads fast. When the results were released, reactions split almost instantly. On one side were the investors and analysts who understood exactly what they were seeing and acted quickly, and the market responded just as fast. The people who reacted fastest weren't guessing. They were reading the data. Investors and analysts who focused on the technical details moved quickly, while others hesitated. On the opposite side, there was a wave of skepticism, especially from institutions. After all, many of those same analysts had studied that region for years and completely missed what Emma had uncovered. They weren't exactly eager to embrace a method that proved them wrong. Questions started flying. Was the resource estimate too optimistic? Was the geological interpretation flawed? Was this just a lucky outlier? At conferences, debates sparked. Experts who had never spent days inside that core shack analyzing those samples firsthand began challenging the conclusions. Emma handled it the same way she handled everything else, calmly, methodically, and backed by data. She published her full structural analysis in an open-access journal. She presented her findings at multiple industry events. She sat down with critics, laid out her maps, assay results, and alteration logs, and walked them through her reasoning step by step. No shortcuts, no defensiveness, just evidence. And eventually, the noise faded, because data doesn't argue, it stands. What followed next is something anyone familiar with mining discoveries will recognize. The real work began. Environmental baseline studies, metallurgical testing to understand how the ore behaves during processing, infrastructure planning, roads, power supply, water access, economic modeling, feasibility assessments. It's a long, often overlooked phase, not exciting, not headline-worthy, and it's exactly where many promising discoveries quietly fall apart. This one didn't. The metallurgy checked out. The ore processed cleanly using standard methods. Infrastructure challenges existed, but nothing insurmountable, and the early economic models held up under pressure. Step by step, the project kept moving forward. For Emma, recognition came, but in a way that didn't quite fit her. She became well known in the junior mining world. Companies wanted her insight, conferences wanted her voice, publications wanted her story. But she never seemed particularly interested in any of it. She wasn't chasing attention. She was thinking about the next data set, the next set of core samples. Still, on a personal level, she understood what this discovery really meant. It wasn't just about the gold. It was proof of something deeper, about method, about mindset, about what happens when you revisit dismissed data and ask it new questions, about the power of combining technical discipline with a refusal to accept easy conclusions. She proved that no map is ever complete, and the people who understand that are the ones who redraw it. There's a moment she's mentioned in interviews, always briefly, never dramatized. It happened after the 6th drill result came in. She was alone in the core shack, the printed results in front of her, the original samples still sitting quietly in their trays. She walked along the shelves, looking at those same boxes of rock that 3 different teams had already examined and misunderstood. And she felt something difficult to describe, not victory, not validation, something quieter, like finishing a long conversation, like asking a question and finally hearing the full answer. She turned off the lights and stepped outside. It was a Yukon summer evening, the kind where the light stretches endlessly, soft and golden, making the land feel like it's glowing from within. She stood there for a while, then she went back inside and started reviewing the next claim. Now, let's zoom out for a second because this story isn't really about $450 million. That number is just the outcome. The real story is what led to it. 3 highly trained, experienced geologists had already studied that ground. They drilled it, tested it, analyzed it, and they walked away. Not because they lacked skill, but because they asked the wrong questions. They approached the data with a model already in mind and looked for evidence to confirm it. When the evidence didn't fit, they assumed the deposit wasn't there. Emma did the opposite. She avoided their conclusions entirely at the start. She didn't even read their final reports before examining the cores herself. She wanted the raw story first, the rock before the interpretation. Only after forming her own understanding did she go back and compare. And that difference, that single shift in approach, changed everything. Because across every field where complex information needs interpretation, the biggest breakthroughs tend to come from people who revisit what everyone else has already seen and ask a different question. Not necessarily a smarter one, just a different one. Sometimes the breakthrough doesn't come from asking a better question. It comes from asking a different one. A question shaped by your experiences, your framework, your willingness to sit with information that doesn't immediately make sense. Emma Culligan spent 11 straight days doing exactly that. 11 days studying core samples that had already been reviewed and dismissed. Most people, even highly skilled and motivated professionals, wouldn't have done that. They would have trusted the earlier reports, moved on, focused their time on something that looked more promising. Emma didn't, because she had been taught something early on. The ground doesn't lie, and she had spent enough time in the field to understand that the line between a major discovery and a missed opportunity usually isn't the geology itself. It's attention. Think about that. $450 million worth of gold wasn't hidden deep in some unreachable place. It was sitting in labeled boxes inside a storage facility in the Yukon. Logged, organized, overlooked, not invisible, not inaccessible, just waiting. Waiting for someone patient enough, stubborn enough, and disciplined enough to ask the right questions. Emma did, and the ground answered. Now that deposit, what was once just a quiet exchange between one geologist and millions of years of geological history, is on its way to becoming a full-scale mining operation. Jobs will be created, infrastructure will be built, entire communities will feel the impact. And it all traces back to those 11 days in a core shack, and one person who refused to assume the earlier teams had it right. That's what real discovery looks like. Not luck, not spectacle, not a dramatic moment shouted across a landscape. It's quieter than that. A fluorescent light, a cylinder of gray rock. If this changed the way you think, hit like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Every week, we dig beneath the surface to find the stories most people miss, and the next one might just change how you see everything.